Hi, welcome again to another session of Word Crumbs. This week we are in the 30th week of Ordinary Time. Today is Friday, and as usual, I like to do a little summary of this week's readings during the weekdays. Something I'd just like to say before we go ahead is it's really beautiful to be curious about who Jesus is. When we come to pray in the Bible, are you interested to know what he feels, what he's thinking? Not just what he teaches, but the kind of person that he is, and the things that he carries in his heart, his motivations and perspectives. And this is something that is this word crumbs are trying to bring us through in order to know Jesus really as a person. And we can know him through the scriptures, through the word. And therefore these crumbs that we are giving opportunities for us to get to know him in a deeper way. Now, just a little recap of last week. We were talking about stewardship and finding true riches. How we can find true riches by sharing. And in sharing, we discover what are the true riches that we have. If you remember, there was a daughter of a very rich tycoon who once said, I'm so poor, the only thing that I have is money. So even she had this experience that there is a greater riches than just what we possess. And when we share what we have and we feel like we are stewards rather than owners of what we have, stewards in order to share what we have, then we realize that there are greater riches than just what we possess. So that was somehow the spirit of the readings of last week, in the 29th week, regarding discovering true riches by sharing what we have and realizing that we're just stewards of all that we own. Now this week, the readings change a little bit of the tone, but in the same spirit of getting to know Jesus, to be interested to know who he is this prophetic determination to love. I would say that that's the theme for this week's readings on the 30th week of Ordinary Time, in the Gospel of Luke. The prophetic determination to love. And I say prophetic determination because to love is not easy. And to be determined to persevere in loving is even more difficult. Or perhaps, you could say even for those of us who are in whatever kind of relationships, could be between a husband and wife, could be with children, could be with friends. It's easy to start to love, but to continue determined to love needs a certain prophetic spirit, and that is what we can see in Jesus today. He teaches us by his person how to have a prophetic determination in loving. Now, going to the readings of this week, we are presented with Luke chapter 13, verse 10 onwards. Okay, I'll just say that. Luke chapter 13, verse 10 to the middle of chapter 14. Okay, it's nice to have a Bible to read because you can get a panorama of all the readings straight away. And then you can even compare the different passages that we are presented every day in the Mass readings. And in such a way, we can understand the context and make comparisons to know what is the general message of all the passages, rather than just taking it piecemeal and then only understanding in a very narrow, I would say, way, rather than having a more broad perspective of what this message of Jesus is for us during this week. Now, the readings of this week is interesting because it's again sandwiched, I would say, between two episodes of discussions over the Sabbath. So once again, we come to the Sabbath. Now, Jesus addressing the Sabbath and the teaching or the meaning of the Sabbath in two different occasions. I would say sandwich because it happens on Monday and today, which is Friday. And then in between the different episodes. Just briefly, you can read it once again. I would encourage you just to read it yourself. But briefly, the first Sabbath episode was when he healed a woman from her bondage, to a devil, and it was done in a synagogue. So the context was a public religious place. And the second Sabbath episode was in the house of a Pharisee. So it was a more intimate, a more private context where he addressed the Sabbath to the Pharisees again. And so you will see that in general, again, he's addressing to this specific group of religious leaders in his time, regarding the teaching on the Sabbath. And there are two questions he asks in these both occasions that are very helpful for us to deepen on the message of this week. He says in verse 3 of chapter 14, I'll start with the second episode first since it's today. Verse 3 of chapter 14, he says, "Is it against the law to cure someone on the Sabbath or not?" Okay, is it against the law to cure on the Sabbath? But if you look at chapter 13, verse 16, okay, going back to the passage on Monday, he says, "Was it not right to untie the bondage on the Sabbath day?" Was it not right to untie the bondage of this woman who was in bondage to this demon for so many years, or this sickness, if you like, on the Sabbath day? So you can sense two different notes there. One is it against the law? So is it wrong? But on the first occasion, it's more like, is it not right? So one is more like a defensive, defending love and charity on the Sabbath. And the other is even promoting and saying it's not just not wrong to do charity, but we should do charity to free others on the Sabbath. And it's beautiful, actually, if you go into the history of the people of Israel. He says, is it not right to untie this bond, to free this person on the Sabbath? Because if you remember, the Sabbath was a day instituted in the Ten Commandments for the Hebrew people to remember that they were freed from slavery. So the whole context of the Sabbath was freedom, was to set people free, to liberate them, to bring them out of their slavery. And so Jesus says, well, isn't this the whole spirit of the Sabbath? And why are you resisting setting people free precisely on the Sabbath day? So coming back to the message of the readings of this week, based on this discussion on the Sabbath, whether it's wrong to love on the Sabbath, and whether actually we should love on the Sabbath, we come back to this theme of the prophetic determination of Jesus to love. And one question of examination for us, putting ourselves in the place of the Pharisees perhaps, it's like as if Jesus was talking to us. It's time to examine what are those resistances that we too have to love. As the Pharisees had these resistances and even very religious justifications of why not to love. So sometimes we too, it's good for us to question, what are our own resistances to love someone? Whether it's in our family, whether it's a workmate, whether it's somebody on the street, a neighbor, whether it's our local politicians, etc. What are those resistances and reasons and excuses that we have for not loving? And Jesus invites us to examine them, not to condemn the resistances, but to really allow him to question us. But isn't it right to love here? Is it wrong to forgive this person? Is it really against our Christian religion to reach out to these certain group of people or to try to include them, etc.? I don't want to go too far into the real situations in the church that are happening today. They'll need another discussion. But when we have resistances, I think the point of this week is to examine them. What are those things that stop us and make us feel that, no, in this place I shouldn't love? Today, in doing my own examination of my own conscience, I found two reasons that could be general resistances for loving. And I invite you also, if you like, to just make that kind of reflection or do that examination of your own conscience. as a Christian, to keep growing, not like Jesus. I mean, to be like Jesus. And the first thing was that sometimes I focus too much on my role and I forget the goal. There's this expression that's being sent out also. It's not about the role, but it's about the goal. So, for example, if you remember the parable of the Good Samaritan, the priest and the Levite, they were too busy to stop to heal the person or to care for the man who was wounded. So there's somebody who's wounded, there's somebody who's in need, or maybe even a group of people, a certain category of people who are in need. And because of my role, I'm a priest, I'm a Levite, so I should not reach out to them. Because what would they say? Maybe I'm a priest and I represent the church, I represent the Christian teachings, and if I reach out to such people, then maybe it shouldn't be. So if I focus too much on the role, I might forget the goal. So, for example, I'm a priest in order that I can reach out to people. But having too much focus on my role, if it stops me from reaching out, then maybe I'm forgetting the goal of my priesthood. Just an example from there. Or I'm a student now, no, I'm studying. So I have to finish my doctorate, for example. So I can't reach out because I'm busy. So what is the goal actually of my doctorate? Is it just to get some knowledge? Or is it really to discover how we can reach out even better to people? So focusing too much on the role might make us forget the goal of Christian life. So that role could be anything. It could be I'm a priest, it could be I'm a father, I'm a mother of a family, so I need to protect first my family. So having to protect my family, I can't reach out to others, no? Or my role is I'm the employer, I'm the leader of this group, I'm the head, I'm a catechist maybe, so I can't do these things that maybe people might question about my faith or my role. I mean, our role is important. I'm not denying the importance of our roles and to know them well. But when our roles, and we focus so much on our roles and our responsibilities in that sense, in those roles, and it stops us and makes us resistant to reach out when the call comes, then is the time where Jesus invites us, like the Pharisees, to examine, isn't it right that we should reach out to them? Or is it wrong, really against the Christian law, the Christian teaching, the commandments, and the Beatitudes, to do this work of charity for those people? And so just to examine whether we're focusing too much on the role and not allowing ourselves to fulfill the goal of our Christian lives. Now, so the first resistance that we could have is something that could be personal, resistance to charity, resistance to love, or to even forgive, and to show all the ways of loving as a Christian. Could be something personal that I've overemphasized or exaggerate my role, and I forget the goal. Now, what is that second resistance that I found that could affect us and stop us from loving? And it's more than a personal level or an individual level of my role. I was realizing in these readings that it could sometimes be our religious culture that actually stops us. So the religious culture at the time of Jesus says that you should not do anything on the Sabbath. And sometimes when we don't think about what the religious culture says, the problem comes and we just repeat things and do what we're supposed to according to the religious culture, but we don't really question the validity of the way we're practicing it. So meaning, the problem is when we don't think. What Jesus does here is to make the Pharisees think. And he's trying to make us think, is it really wrong? No. So he's making us think. Or isn't it right? So you see, a challenge here is to think and to reconsider whether our religious culture is really promoting the most essential, which is to love. And that changing of religious culture takes prophetic determination. So coming back to the theme, how Jesus shows us that he knows that the religious culture was against him. Not just because he wants to be a maverick or a rebel, but because he knows he's fighting for something really essential to God, that maybe the religious culture was not responding to. And he knew that he would have resistance not just from within, but he would have resistance from without, from outside. And so, if you go back to yesterday's reading about Herod, the Pharisees were the ones saying, "Go away from here because Herod's going to kill you." So I wonder really whether they were concerned about Jesus or they're just using that as an excuse to get rid of him. And Jesus says something very beautiful here. It's chapter 13, verse 32. He replies, "You may go and give that fox this message. Look, today and tomorrow I drive out devils and heal. And on the third day I attain my end." So he's saying that, whatever Herod's going to do to me, I have to keep healing on the Sabbath or whatever day. So he's very determined about God being love in the essence. And God frees, God liberates by loving and forgiving. So he's clear about that. And he says, I'm going to do it still. He's determined. He says, but for today and tomorrow and the next day, I must go on, since it would not be right for a prophet to die outside Jerusalem. So Jesus was clear of his real role in the midst of everything, that I am a prophet, and I need to be a prophet of a God who is love. And if that is my deepest and truest identity, I need to be, that gives me determination to carry out my prophetic duty to love and to reveal a God who loves. And even if my role is a priest, even if my role is a teacher, even if my role is a politician, a father, a judge, a lawyer, or whoever I am, whatever my role is, my main prophetic role is to reveal a God who wants to love and to free people from their slaveries in concrete situations today, tomorrow, and the next day. I must go on. So Jesus here reveals once again, in summary, the prophetic determination that is needed if really we want to love as Christians, to know who we are for God, and to keep praying for that determination that comes from God. Because the motivation doesn't come from our role. Even if I'm a priest, having that office doesn't make me want to reach out. It is that daily contact with God in prayer, in being motivated by His desire to reach out and to love, that makes me reach out to others. So today, let us allow Jesus to speak to us through these Sabbath passages once again. Whenever you have resistances, let us examine ourselves. Is it not right to love? Let Jesus question us. Is it really wrong to love here? And if we have so-called valid justifications because of our role or because of what our religious culture tells us, let us try to let those questions examine really where to put the balance, how to find the balance to continue with that prophetic determination to love the people around us.